Hey guys, and welcome back to my channel. So it is the end of June, which means it is time for me to do my second round of most anticipated 2024 reads. You might be saying, Violet, you literally had 3 videos uploaded at the beginning of the year of your most anticipated reads, and I did. I have a lot of books I really want to read this year, but most of those releases were either from very, very large publications, or they were announced for the first half of 2024. So as the year goes on, more novels get released, and I tend to keep track of them, and then in the middle of summer every year, I try and do one of these videos to just talk about the other books that didn't make it onto my first set of lists because I wasn't aware of them. So I'm just going to dive right into it. I think I have 9 books on here today. Some might be a little surprising, but I definitely want to talk about books I am excited to read in the second half of 2024. So first up is going to be Memorials by Richard Shizmar. This is going to come out on October 22nd, and it is by Gallery Books, not by Cemetery Dance, which is interesting. I've really only read Chasing the Boogeyman and Becoming the Boogeyman by Richard Shizmar, but I really, really enjoy that series. So I'm very, very excited for this one. I'm going to read the synopsis, and I haven't really read any of these synopses. I may have read briefly when I first heard about it, but I put all of the synopses here today, and I tried really hard to make sure that I wasn't reading any of them until just now. So I'm giving my full honest reactions on all of these. So the premise for this one. A group of students encounter a supernatural terror while on a road trip through Appalachia in this chilling new novel by the New York Times bestselling author of the unforgettable and scary Chasing the Boogeyman. In 1983, 3 students from a small college embark on a week-long road trip to film a documentary on roadside memorials for their American Studies class. The project starts out as a fun adventure with long stretches of empty road and nightly campfires where they begin to open up with one another. But as they venture deeper into the Appalachian backwoods, the atmosphere begins to darken. They notice more and more of the memorials feature a strange, unsettling symbol hinting at a sinister secret. Paranoia sets in when it appears they are being followed. Their vehicle is tampered with overnight, and some of the locals appear to be anything but welcoming. Before long, the students can't help but wonder if these roadside deaths were really random accidents, or is something terrifying at work here. Okay, interesting. I am all for this 1983 style setting. I think that was what I loved so much about Chasing the Boogeyman, was kind of the retro setting in the first one, and I really, really enjoyed that. I think that really elevated that storyline a little bit more than it did with Becoming the Boogeyman being set almost entirely in present day. So really, really excited about this. This also kind of reminds me a little bit of, Killing Yourself to Live by Chuck Klosterman. Kind of the same premise, except that's a nonfiction story that Chuck Klosterman actually did. If you've never read anything by Chuck Klosterman, he's just a fantastic kind of pop culture and lifestyle writer, and he writes these kind of essayist nonfiction collections, and they're just absolutely fantastic. So definitely check him out if you haven't before. But that's what this kind of reminds me of. Very excited for that. Okay, so next up we have The Good and Joyful Things by Anya Allborn. This one's a little tricky because it's going to be available this summer through Suntup Press. However, it's $125 at the starting point, and the actual paperback release won't be until later. I think it's coming out in the fall. Anya Allborn did say that they will be releasing it eventually for the general masses, but right now it's just going to be released this summer through Suntup Press. I don't know how I feel about that, but okay, but let's read the synopsis. Okay, so it says, a new novel from the Amazon #1 best-selling author of Brother and Seed, Good and Joyful Things, is Anya Allborn's horrifying manifesto of marriage manipulation and the unpredictability of human relationships. Simone and Elliot Evans have it all. A comfortable life, a house on a quiet street, and 2 sweet daughters. But their marriage is far from happy, especially now. While Elliot spends all day at work, postpartum depression presses down hard on Simone's shoulders. Baby Lizzie is colicky and often sick. 4-year-old Aster is a handful, and not at all as good a helper as Simone had hoped. The more time Simone spends home alone with the girls, the more she's convinced that Ellie's interest in his family is waning. He's pining for his ex, Layton Prescott, a woman who mysteriously disappeared from their small New Hampshire town years before, leaving her and Elliot's then newborn daughter, Aster, behind. When Simone confronts Elliot in search of the truth, he reminds her that this isn't the first time she's accused him of being unfaithful, and it isn't the first time her assumption has been wrong. But when Simone spots Leighton at the grocery store in their tiny hometown, she has her proof. Leighton Prescott is back, and despite what Elliot says, Simone knows Leighton will stop at nothing to destroy the life she's built with Elliot, piece by precious piece. Terrified of losing her family, Simone puts Elliot to the ultimate test. He's left with one last chance to save the marriage he vowed to preserve. But rather than rekindling the love he and Simone once shared, he instead uncovers an unfathomable truth about the woman he calls his wife, a woman that, as it turns out, he doesn't know at all. With Good and Joyful Things, Anya Allborn tackles the subject of marriage using her signature brand of brutality to write a psychological thriller that explores the terrifying secrets that can dwell in even the most intimate relationships. Okay, so that sounds very much like a traditional Anya Allborn family horror story. Very excited for it once I can, get my hands on it, but I just can't really justify spending a minimum of $125 on a book I've never read before. I know that is going to be a beautiful edition. I know there's several different versions of it. I believe 125 is just the starting block. And I know I've spoken about this before on my channel. I'm very excited for the story and for that to come out. I just will probably be waiting until the full paperback release happens. So there's that. Okay, next up, we're going to have Candy Cane Kills Again, The Second Slaying by Brian McCauley. This will be coming out on November 12th. And this is the sequel to Candy Cane Kills, which was my Christmas horror story of last year. I got it in my Nightworms package and I loved it. I thought it was just a really, really fun, campy, B-movie style slasher. It was great. I'm very excited that there's going to be a sequel. Just note that there is a chance that I'm about to read spoilers, but this is a really small little blurb, so I don't think it's going to have many spoilers for the original, and if you haven't read it, definitely pick it up. It was very fun. So it says, a slasher sequel that picks up immediately where the first book left off, with the festive killer coming to town on Christmas morning to punish a parish full of sinners. And that's all that we have. So very little known, but it will come out about a month before Christmas, month and a half before Christmas. I will absolutely be reading that. Christmas horror is one of those things that I think when it's done well, it can be really, really fun. I feel like there's not that many out there. And I had way too much fun with the book last time. I thought it was brilliant and I read it really, really quickly. But again, it's going to be kind of campy B-movie style horror. It's a little bit ridiculous. It's a little over the top. It's very gory in almost a cheesy 80s kind of way. So just note that's what you're going into. Okay, next up we have Sleep Tight by J.H. Merkert. And that will be coming out on September 10th. This is the third horror book by J.H. Merkert. He has written a bunch of other books under a different name, I think under his real name, not with the initials. But I enjoyed the first two that I read from him. He did Mr. Lullaby and The Nightmare Man. I really like his ability to create these kind of dreamscape worlds and this lore around everything. And all of his books, I think, are going to be connected in the same kind of universe, very Stephen King-ish. I really enjoyed The Nightmare Man. Mr. Lullaby, I think, really fell flat for me, but I enjoyed the writing and the adventure and the world building in it, so I'm very excited to see what he does with Sleep Tight. I'm going to read the Goodreads blurb. It says, the sole survivor of a serial killer might hold the key to stopping a new spree of murders in this propulsive thriller in the vein of The Black Phone and The Whisper Man. Dark and twisting at every turn, fans of Catriona Ward will love this chilling new tale from the divisively inventive horror author that Peter Ferris calls the clear heir to Stephen King. Beware the one who got away. Father Silence once terrorized the rural town of Twisted Tree, disguising himself as a priest to prey on the most vulnerable members of society. When the police finally found his house of horrors, they uncovered 19 bodies and one survivor, a boy now locked away in a hospital for the criminally insane. Nearly 2 decades later, Father Silence is finally put to death, but the next morning, the detective who made the original arrest is found dead. A new serial killer is taking credit for the murder and calling himself the Outcast. The detective's daughter, Tess Claiborne, is a detective herself, haunted by childhood trauma and horrified by the death of her father and the resurgence of Father Silence's legacy. When Tess's daughter is kidnapped by the Outcast, Tess is forced to face her worst fears and long-buried memories. With no leads to follow, she travels back to Twisted Tree to visit the boy who survived and see what secrets might be buried in the tangled web of his broken mind. With captivating prose and an old-school horror flair, Sleep Tight is a must-read haunting tale from a true master of the genre. That was a lot of name dropping in there, I feel like, to sell the general public on kind of an unknown author at this time. One of the things I really like about J.H. Marker, though, is that he's really good at kind of pairing the supernatural for an explanation of a kind of crime thriller. All of his books always kind of start out as these kind of crazy crime thrillers, and then they kind of go down the supernatural route. When I first read it, I was like, the very first book I read from him, The Nightmare Man, I was kind of thrown off by the way that he does that. But now kind of knowing that that's his thing, I'm prepared for it, and I know it's not going to be like a plausible explanation the way that Riley Sager does his kind of big crimey reveals. So just know that going into it. But I'm excited for this. Again, I think he's a very, very imaginative author, and I think he's doing something that we haven't really seen anybody doing recently. So I'm definitely excited to see more of this. I also like how all of his mythology and his like lore and creatures and supernatural elements are based on like the dream world, very like Neil Gaiman Sandman-esque, instead of like traditional horror tropes. I really, really like that about him. So that's also something to keep in mind if you haven't read J.H. Marker before. Okay, next up. This book is actually already out. It came out on June 18th, and I wasn't aware of it. And I wanted to put this in here just in case other people weren't aware of it either. And I didn't really have Craig DeLuey on my radar until I read episode 13, which everybody seems to love. I wasn't the biggest fan of, but I really liked his writing and his ideas and kind of how eager he was to put forward these new kind of compelling concepts. So I want to definitely read more from Craig DeLuey, but he has already released his new book, How to Make a Horror Movie and Survive. I'm going to read the blurb now. It says, from Bram Stoker Award-nominated author Craig DeLuey comes a darkly humorous horror novel that sees a famous 80s slasher director set out to shoot the most terrifying horror movie ever made using an occult camera that might be, and probably is, demonic. Horror isn't horror unless it's real. Max Murray should be on top of the world. He's a famous horror director. Actors love him, Hollywood needs him. He's making money hand over fist. But it's the 80s, and he's directing cheap slashers for audiences who only crave more blood, not real art, not real horror. And Max's slimy producer refuses to fund any of his new ideas. Sally Priest dreams of being the final girl. She knows she's got what it takes to score the lead role, even if she's only been cast in small parts so far. When Sally meets Max at his latest rap party, she sets out to impress him and prove her scream queen prowess. But when Max discovers an old camera that filmed a very real Hollywood horror, he knows that he has to use this camera for his next movie. The only problem is that it came with a cryptic warning and sometimes wailed. By the time Max discovers the true evil lying within, he's already dead set on finishing the scariest movie ever put to film. And like it or not, it's Sally's time to shine as the final girl. I'm really into these horror authors that have been kind of paying tribute to like these 80s slasher self-aware novels. I just read Ex-Boogeyman by Christopher Triana, which I have a whole review on. I loved that. I thought it was absolutely brilliant. Obviously the Indian Lake trilogy by Stephen Graham Jones really plays up this trope as well. But I think this is a really, really fun thing. And I think Craig DeLuey, the way he was able to do like the behind-the-scenes reality television horror book that he did with episode 13, it makes sense that this would be a transition into making a horror movie. So I'm very interested in seeing where this is. I'm very interested to see where this is going to go. I also like that it says it's going to be darkly humorous. I really do think that if you're going to tackle 80s slashers, there has to be an element of humor in it for it to work for the general horror audience. If you're going to do a true slasher film and you want to set it in present day, I feel like it should be really scary and disturbing, but if you want to set it in the 80s, it needs to have that cheese factor. And I'm excited to see how he does this. I kind of hope it's written in the same style as episode 13, because I really kind of liked the episodic, epistolary style that he had with that. Okay, next up, this is surprising, and I'm only putting it on here for one reason. But on October 29th, Nick Cutter will be releasing The Queen. Now, I have said a lot of things about Nick Cutter on my channel before, and the vast majority of it is I won't read Nick Cutter. And I feel like that's not fair, because I won't read Nick Cutter because a lot of his books deal with very graphic, in-depth depictions of animal cruelty. I don't like reading about that. If that's something that you guys like, it's something you enjoy reading, awesome, you guys can read it. I don't like reading it, and I read horror books to have fun, to enjoy myself. But everybody says Nick Cutter is this great author, so I'm hoping that The Queen will be the one book I can pick up from him that doesn't have any ridiculous animal cruelty. I'm going to read the back of this book, and this will probably tell me if I can or can't. And I also wanted to put this on because maybe you guys haven't heard of it, and a lot of people are fans of Nick Cutter, so hopefully this will be the book where I can give his writing a chance. And then when I get on this channel and say the things I think about Nick Cutter, I will have a little bit more background to stand on when I say my critiques, or if I see that, yeah, I understand why people like his writing, because his writing is really good. He just writes about topics that I don't want to read. So I really want to eventually one day read something by Nick Cutter. Hopefully it'll be this. Let's see what the blurb says. The national best-selling author of horror book talk sensation, The Troop, returns with a heart-pounding novel of terror and a young woman searching for her missing friend and uncovering a shocking truth. On a sunny morning in June, Margaret Carpenter wakes up to find a new iPhone on her doorstep. She switches it on to find a text from her best friend, Charity Atwater. The problem is, Charity's been missing for over a month. Most people in town, even the police, think she's dead. Margaret and Charity have been lifelong friends. They share everything, know the most intimate details about one another, but Charity carries a secret that even she is unaware of, a secret engraved into her DNA helix. For Charity is also known, I think it's supposed to say is known as, Subject 6, the crown jewel of Project Athena, a clandestine and unorthodox gene manipulation experiment, the brainchild of tech titan Rudyard Crate. And when Charity's gene sequencing actualizes during a traumatic event at a high school party, it sets in motion a chain of events that will end in tragedy, bloodshed, and death. And now Charity wants Margaret to know her story, the real story. In a narrative that takes place over one feverish day, Margaret follows a series of increasingly dreadful breadcrumbs as she forges deeper into the mystery of her best friend, a person she never knew at all. Okay, interesting. DNA sequencing in lab, that kind of makes me think maybe there's going to be like test animals and like lab rats, so hopefully there's nothing and I can read this book, because I really do eventually want to be able to read him and just, you know, say what I want to say, but I'm not going to read him with his animal cruelty in there. And you guys can get mad at me in the comments all you want, but that is my personal belief. It's not something I want to read, so hopefully this book I can finally read his writing. Okay, next up we have Kill Your Darling by Clay McLeod Chapman. This is actually going to be his second release this year. This is going to be 167 pages though, so it's kind of short. His other novel is going to be, I believe, a novella. And this is coming out on September 24th. And this says, the acclaimed author of Ghost Eaters and What Kind of Mother is coming to Bad Hand Books with a new novella, nearly 40,000 words. Okay, so I guess 2 novellas this year. Okay, so it says, the body of Glenn Partridge's 15-year-old son was discovered in a vacant lot nearly 40 years ago. The police are still no closer to finding the murderer decades later. Glenn refuses to let the memory of his son fade, or let anyone else within the small working-class community forget. His long-suffering wife signs him up for an amateur fiction writing workshop at the local library just to get him out of the house and out of his own head. Rule number 1, write what you know. So Glenn decides to share his son's story. The class offers him a chance to make sense of a senseless crime and find the fictional closure life never provided. But as Glenn's story takes on a life of its own, someone from the past is compelled to come out of hiding before he reaches the end. Okay, I was really blown away by What Kind of Mother. I really loved Whisper Down the Lane. I have many thoughts on Ghost Eaters, which I won't touch upon now because I have a whole video on it. But Clay McLeod Chapman is one of those authors that I'm really invested in watching what he has to do and reading what he has to say, so very excited for that. Alright, and last but not least, I just found out about this one today, and it comes out in like 2 months, but we have a new release from Christopher Triana. Now, he already released a novel called The Old Lady this year, which I didn't actually know about when I made my first round of videos for Most Anticipated of 2024, and I'm bummed about that. And I haven't read it yet. It's on my list to read. I will get to Full Brutal. I know I say that all the time. But Christopher Triana is one of my go-to favorite horror authors. He does dabble in more extreme horror than other things, but he's an instant buy author for me, so I'm very excited about this. This is going to be a pretty brief one. It's a novella as well, but it is coming out on August 16th. This says it's 136 pages, and it is called Because You're Mine. And it says, Brian's elderly mother is terminally ill, and that's the way he likes it. Mom comes from old money, making it easy for Brian to hire an in-home nurse. But he's looking for someone to provide a special kind of treatment, something he's long fantasized about. Shelby is a nurse with a horrible secret. When she begins caring after Brian's mother, the two strike up an unlikely kinship, bonding over their troubled past and hidden desires. Together, the older Brian begins teaching Shelby classic methods of diabolism, and she teaches him about the modern tools of their terrifying trade, making them a duo to die for. Because You're Mine is an extreme horror romance from the dark heart of Christopher Triana, author of Gone to See the Riverman and They All Died Screaming. Anyway, I love Triana. I'm going to read it. I'm going to hopefully enjoy it, and it'll probably make me squirm, but Triana's like my favorite extreme horror author out there because he can write really amazing, disturbing, compelling, scary stories, and yet I never feel like he takes the imagery too far. He will make you uncomfortable, but you kind of won't be overtly disgusted. He's never putting too much into his extreme horror, and I love that he has that ability to balance what he writes. So I love Christopher Triana, so I'm very, very, very excited about that. Anyway, those are my 9 books to add to my most anticipated 2024 reading list. Let me know if there are any books down below that I missed or that you are excited for or that you think I should read. I would love to hear about them. I do read every single one of my comments. I don't always respond, but I do read every single one of them, so yes. Anyways, that is all that I have today. As always, I try to post every Monday and Thursday, sometimes on Saturdays, and if you enjoy these videos, please hit the like and subscribe buttons down below, and I will catch you on the next one. Mwah.